A quick listener note, we are up to episode 14 in total. We've got 3 series currently on the go, and this is episode 12 in what is our second Roundtable podcast in series 1, which is called The Do's and Don'ts of Support Coordination, where we take a look inside of what it's like to be an NDIS support coordinator and also help them better navigate the ever-changing NDIS. This podcast is called The Journey to Conscious Healthcare, where we explore what it takes to consciously create longevity, happiness, and fulfillment in your life and that of others. The Journey to Conscious Healthcare looks at the healthcare industry, disability sector, and how to best navigate these areas to get the best for you and your life. I'm your host, Trevor, and I'm also the founder and CEO of Conscious Healthcare SA, an expert company that is known for high-quality healthcare services and transforming the healthcare industry in the disability space. Today's show is sponsored by Conscious Healthcare SA. At Conscious Healthcare SA, we provide high-quality NDIS healthcare services in the comfort of your own home. If you're interested in an easy and reliable way to navigate the NDIS and also access healthcare services, please do get in touch. As mentioned earlier, today is our second roundtable discussion. These discussions unpack challenges that are currently occurring within the support coordination space, and it also just brings it up to the surface. Today, we're lucky enough to have Devon Milton-Hutchinson from United Country SA and Christy Brown from the growing space together. And rather than me giving an introduction, given it's in a bit more of a relaxed setting, I'd love to hear from yourself. Devon, would you like to start off and introduce yourself, please?
Sure can. So I'm Devon Milton-Hutchinson. I'm actually the team leader of our disability services team at United Country SA. I've been lucky enough to be part of our team for nearly 3 years. I started as a support coordinator in Port Pirie, where I brought my grandparents' caravan up for a short-term temp job. Stayed for a few weeks, and then they let me go out on a limb and run wild and free in the Air and Western to create the other side of the team. So I've been the team leader for nearly a year and still do some complex specialist support coordination and help out when needed.
Oh, it's a fantastic introduction, and I would argue that you are highly, highly passionate. We've had many laughs, giggles, and good times whilst helping people along the way, I would say.
Oh, definitely. It's been good, and honestly, if you couldn't laugh about it, it would be harder.
Oh, I totally hear that. And Christy, likewise, a little bit light and bubbly. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey today and where we are. We do note that we've got a dog in the background, which will add a bit of fun and entertainment. So you know what? We are not just a trio; we are a quadruple situation here, I reckon.
We certainly are today. So, yeah, apologies for the dog. I've been a support coordinator with the growing space for almost 18 months now. I'm a social worker by trade. So, been a social worker for 25 years or more. And I'm based in Murray Bridge, and I kind of cover all the way from the surrounding towns in the Murray Bridge all the way down the freeway to the Adelaide Hills, so quite a big area, and I'm really enjoy working with the team at the growing space at present. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic! Well, we've got plenty of questions. We've got plenty of questions in which we can open up, especially the whole social work situation and about the registration, all that coming through. But I won't jump in there straight away. Our theme today is going through things in regards to rural. So where we are at the moment, I think Devon, you're out at Whyalla. Is that correct?
Yep, so I'm based in Whyalla, and our team kind of covers from the Yorke Peninsula up to Port Pirie, Port Augusta and Coober Pedy, and then down to Whyalla, Port Lincoln, and our furthest participant is Streaky Bay. So we kind of cover that whole area. Our main hubs are Port Pirie, Port Augusta and Whyalla, but we travel and provide work. So I think Christy and I are kind of opposite ends of the state. She's got the other half covered, and I've got down here kind of sorted.
Oh, perfect. And Christy, do you want to go through a little bit? I know you said where you travelled through, but just to get a bit of a landscape, I think the rural people love a mention of a couple of towns in which you sort of service. I know you said going down the hill, but particularly as far as country goes. Whereabouts do you sort of trek out towards?
So, yeah, I'll go Manham and Helen Bend, really anywhere in this area. Like, it could be absolutely anywhere within an hour and a half from Murray Bridge out. Yeah.
Rightio. Well, I think that's fantastic. I think what the listeners want to know is we are not scared of spending petrol money. We get
absolutely
a few kilometres
not.
up.
I spend more time on the road than I do at my desk.
I'm born and bred in Mount Barker, which I would not argue is overly country right now, given how big the population's growing. But I do know what the treks up and down the hill are like, and heading out towards Murray Bridge and Monardo and those sorts of regions. Also, recently been a while, the 10-hour return journey there, which is it's been a fantastic learning experience, and we've certainly got some things that we need to tackle. We do have a question to start up with, which is more a bit a personal one. So it's whereabouts are you from, and also what was it like growing up? And maybe we'll jump to Christy first.
Well, hello. Obviously, from my accent, I was born and bred in the north of England, so quite a different landscape to the one that I live in now. And I've been in Australia now for 16 years. So growing up, I grew up actually in a really small, very, very, very small rural village. Ex-mill town, so surrounded by the moors of Yorkshire. So very, very different, but lots of similar issues in some respects to the ones that we face in regional and rural Australia.
Oh, that's very interesting. It's we've got some very vast array of people that have come. There's quite a few people that are British or have sort of started that journey there and ventured over to Australia. And it's always interesting to hear different takes and perspective on different healthcare systems and the way it navigates, because the NDIS's framework actually originated from what did start in the UK. So it's always good to go back to origins as such. And Devon, you want to say this a little bit?
So I'm born and bred in Whyalla. I've been here majority of my life. I was homeschooled for a little bit when I was younger. We travelled in a caravan for a while. I went to Adelaide to get my uni degrees after high school. So I have some degrees in psychological sciences and psychotherapy. So that's my background. But my parents, my dad's from Glasgow and my mum's actually from Devon, hence my name. So, yeah, they came over when they were really little.
Oh, wow, it's a beautiful part of the world there, Devon. Absolutely, it's amazing. Right, well, let's jump in. Rural situations, rural areas. What do we talk about to start with? I reckon, what is your biggest bee in your bonnet? I reckon that's got to be a decent one. I know it's a negative note, but like biggest bee in your bonnet. Come on, what sort of ticks you off a little bit? We might chuck Christy straight in, I reckon.
Yeah. I think it's just literally just before I came on here, I was actually out with a client and we were having this same discussion. It's the Saffy don't stay. It's the transience of professionals. It's the people doing 6 months on placement, so that when people get a therapist or they get a support in place, especially therapists, it's never long term. And that's really, really tricky, especially for a lot of my client group. So we find there's a lot of very, very transient nature of the professionals that we can get here. And obviously the big elephant in the room is the lack of said support. So we just can't get the support.
No, I got that. And flipping across to you there, Devon.
I completely agree. I think the staffing, it leads into so many other issues as well. I think the expectation of the country isn't quite understood, because you can't retain staff, you can't get them in the first place, or that you spend what little time you do have with them trying to establish a relationship, so you're not really getting to the point of the issue or to the core reason why you're attending that therapy. So you don't really know how beneficial it is in the long run when you might have 3 or 4 different therapists for the same discipline in 1 or 2 years. Yeah,
it's really tricky. It's an interesting one. We've just in the last episode had Olivia Watson, who she was formerly at Novita as a social worker and also support coordinator. And I suppose you'd probably know quite well, Christy, the systems approach in regards to, as a social worker, that you tend to know systems quite well. And I'm really quite intrigued, I guess, as far as How are the systems actually letting rural people down? What I mean by that, I'll unpack it a bit more. It's clearly a bit of a loaded question, but what I mean by that is, okay, well, we've got access to NDIS. We've also got how many people are around there, funding models, because the money coming into it also means that that'll then provide you a certain amount of people or not. So how does this sort of play out and think in your view, how does that actually positively or negatively affect how people get access in rural areas? Christy, as a social worker, do you want to kick off? Although I'm very interested the other way to hear from you, Devon, as well.
Sorry, I've got a helicopter now circling overhead. This is why the dog's barking. Sorry, can you just, I'm going to have to think, because I didn't hear a lot of what you just said. I'm really sorry, Trevor, I can't.
That's all right, not a worry.
Yeah,
so fundamentally, how do systems and the way that they integrate or don't integrate, how do they pretty much handicap, I suppose, some rural residents in regards to getting access to what they might have? So as an example, there are challenges through the systems that are in place that are a lot harder when you're in a rural situation than if you're in metro, for example. And maybe we'll have Devon start off, and then that might fuel you a couple of thoughts there for you as well.
That's a big question, Trevor. I don't really know where to start with that. I think what I see we work closely with so many different systems. You, as a support coordinator, because you work with all these healthcare, aged care, DCP, NDIS, all these spaces, you can see the gaps and you don't know what to fill it with. So I don't know whether it's like a lack of mainstream service providers having not enough NDIS knowledge to support people, but you still, even now with as many services are out there, there's still lots of gaps and people slip through them.
Absolutely. Well, I might expand upon this a little bit more, which I think might open up the door a little bit. I've previously spoken in a past podcast about GPs, so doctors. And doctors, if we look at a systems sort of setup, there's no incentive whatsoever for a doctor to know anything about the NDIS because there's just no money in it for them. And from that perspective, if that is the gatekeeper of which gets someone in the door or not in the door, is that not a problem? You know what I mean? Is that not then going to automatically be a barrier that, Linda Reynolds and her team can have a look at as to how can we actually get people in the door? Because fundamentally, you've got to be in the door to start the game, right? Or what are you going to do? Christy, I might hand over to you, but that's clearly just one area that we could sort of focus on.
Yeah, I think that probably is one. I think what I guess we experience here is probably more about expectations, the systemic expectations. Is more of an issue for us up here in terms of not knowing how to get into the system, yes, but that when you are in the system, the expectation from different systems that their job is done. So there's a big gap between mental health. We'll automatically, we've got mental health, so NDS are involved now, we are out. Other agencies, so that's over to NDIS. And the lack of understanding between those systems of, yes, the funding may be there, but that doesn't necessitate that the supports are there to put in place, or that the situation has been resolved, because we're also tackling lots of other issues which are a significant issue. Is the housing problems that we've got in regional and remote, the employment issues that we've got, the poverty issues that we've got, that all really, really impact on people's engagement. So even when there are supports in place, people's engagement is severely impacted by that. So I think it's just a really, like Devon said, it's just such a big question and such a big thing that it's really hard to pin that down.
Well, I totally agree.
Picked up on a thing there. I'll actually jump on there, Devon. I'd love to hear more. It sounds like you got a bit more juice there to squeeze out of the orange.
No, I totally agree. Like, I think a lot of the time the first thing I say to people is if they give me a ring and say, hey, I've just got on the NDIS, my first thought is, congratulations, like you've done the hard part. Like it is, it's exhausting. And you see, like, especially, for example, parents of young children, they may have a couple of young kids and they're trying to put in all this extra time into such an unknown, confusing, almost separate language type world to navigate. And like you said, as a GP, you've probably got a million other things that's more, interesting and a bigger incentive and something that you might, want to pursue instead. The NDIS might not be their thing. So there's community engagement, or there's someone else to help fill that gap, but really there's not.
I agree with that. It is tricky, and I've written down here start and finish of responsibilities. Someone who I think has been exceptional, I will absolutely praise massively, Aaron Byrne, who I'm about to interview on the podcast coming up. But he's been fantastic. So he does work with the NDIA, and what's really good with his team is particularly you contact them and there's a no wrong door policy. So fundamentally, I don't think we see this enough. Fundamentally, if someone's got a problem, how often do you, and Christy, this one might light your eyebrows up a little bit here. What about the whole difference with education and the NDIS, you know what I mean? Like, as in, how does that fit? And autism's clearly a 101 with that, right?
Yeah.
Like, as in, and typically, and I'll mention another one here, Autism SA is usually the person, they want someone from Autism SA to go out, and then they've got to assess, and then they've got to go, okay, here's the problem, so then we should provide for X funding through the scheme, which is, I'm fairly confident, unless I get it wrong, state government funding, right? And so everyone wants to palm it off from one person to another. But whilst we just open this up, I mean, I saw it the other day, and it's actually now on my radar massively, participants getting stuck in hospitals. In hospitals, I think the average, I can't remember the exact weight, is it 34 days in hospitals, or it might be 60 odd, whereas in aged care, it's 10 days. So, there's a petition going out for that at the moment. I know that's got a bit political, but it's just like, how is this sort of happening? Why are we not, where my hand ends, surely someone else's hand's got to overlap a little bit and assist. So I'm curious as to whether there's more discussion about that, and not so much in a negative light. I'm really hoping that we can raise this for Linda Reynolds and, for the health ministers and all that sort of stuff to flag up and actually take some responsibility with about, hey, how can we work together? Because it's collaboration that we need, isn't it?
Mm. And it's about collaboration. I think about collaboration and education. It's about understanding how those things work together. You raise Autism SA, and I'm not sure what it's like in Wales, but I'm guessing it's similar, is that they don't actually come beyond a 50K boundary. So, those services that the education part will refer to are actually a bit null and void once we get out of the metro. But they are still the system that's in place.
We have to get relatively creative with what a lot of the things that we do in that space. I found that in general, a lot of the ideas that those systems might have and their go-to their referral options may not be super applicable for our area.
That's right.
So we have to be a bit creative and think outside of the box, and how can we work together with people and to connect. And sometimes it's about connecting the participant, but also connecting their support network to the right people.
Yeah. Mm.
Because a lot of the time it's about, mums or dads or carers or whatever that need that support as well.
Massively.
Yeah.
This is quite a fruitful conversation I'm finding here. It's about, really connecting people. And I'm even really getting, just from our initial conversation here, very much a collaborative approach and willingness to work together, which I'm not saying doesn't exist in Metro, but I think that fundamentally, aren't we all here to help people? I think that's a theme that's coming across really broadly, very quickly here, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, my practice anyway is very, very much that team approach. So, looking at bringing supports together, sitting down with families, and like Devon says, being really, really creative, and that may be being creative with the speech therapist. What can we do? Being creative with the school. How can we make this work? And we're looking at those kind of like those eco mapping and things with families and saying, like, who is that out there? What have we got? Or what can we do with what we've got? Because we don't have as much option. And if one support doesn't work, there isn't a backup support all the time. So trying to be really creative is central to that.
Definitely much needed. I think what is really exciting, I won't spend too much time on it, but with the recent election and all that sort of stuff as well, Peter from Labor, he's ended up putting forward that having a proper plan in place in regards to autism. I don't know if you picked that up in the news, but he'll definitely be getting a tag and mentioned in the show notes. And I've also got the expert that also does help with the diagnosis of autism as well, which is going to be coming on shortly. And I dare say that we're going to see this coming forward, and we're going to see a real concrete plan and some actions getting put in place, which I think is probably music to your ears in country areas. If you've got autism and all that sort of stuff, it's not anywhere near as easy to get a diagnosis. And I don't know if you want to say anything about that, because I've seen that firsthand just in the last couple of weeks from being out at Whyalla and Port Augusta and Port Pirie, all that sort of stuff.
There's a vast majority of plans in my team that don't have a diagnosis. Everything is unspecified intellectual. It's other physical. It fits those really big boxes.
Yeah.
So when you try to narrow down and ensure the plan really fits that person's needs, it's so hard because it's so big to start off with. And then trying to justify equipment or additional supports or whatever. No, that's just unspecified intellectual disability. That's only applicable if you've got A, B, or C. Like it's pretty hard.
Yeah, it's an absolute challenge. And Christy, anything to add there? It sounds like we're singing the same drum here, but
yeah. I mean, I think so. And the pathway to diagnosis is so hard, and the reality is that we're relying on people's personal finances and resources to be able to even access that diagnosis, because the public waiting lists are so long. And even if you are lucky enough to get a spot, you still got to get there. And there's just so many barriers for those people who are regional. It's, you may be able to afford the transport, but can you get an assessment? It's not easy at all.
How many families have an extra $1,500 for an assessment? Not many.
Plus the $300 for fuel.
And to stay overnight, because for us we can't go up in a day and get it done.
That's it.
I don't think we've personally got planes or helicopters that we can use to make that a little bit quicker or easier. So that makes it a bit challenging. It is actually something that at Conscious Healthcare SA we're pretty big on, and one of our dreams and visions is to be able to provide, a couple diagnoses. It might only be a couple, but 3 per month to be able to get people onto the scheme. But fundamentally, I mean, this has got to be a responsibility of the scheme, doesn't it? Like to be able to actually provide access or to remove barriers, and how do we mobilise systems and people to be able to get them onto the scheme? I mean, I know the NDIS is going to get bigger and bigger and all that sort of stuff, but how much is it costing us by not actually getting people the early assistance? I mean, you look at how much money gets spent on support work, and it's all valid, right? Like I said, it's needed. But like I said, if you spend the money early, you save yourself 10 times the amount of money down the track. Like, that's for sure.
And I think it's awareness as well. Like, go back to the thing about, GPs, that, there are some pathways, but a lot of people just don't know it. They don't know about getting healthcare plans. They don't know about linking with, early childhood interventions that are available to everybody, that the kind of the first step to that diagnosis. So many participants that I meet with don't know about the role of the CAFS nurse and just how instrumental they can be in assisting with diagnosis and things. So I think it's a really, really big systemic issue, going back to what you're saying earlier on about understanding as a whole. And I think, again, like GPs in regional areas, like other things, they're so transient. You may find a really good GP and then they're gone and everyone's back to starting base again. So it's...
I think it's tricky for that group of people that, that middle-aged person who's been on their own for quite some time, who doesn't have, a relatively robust informal support network. They don't have any historical documentation of their life. Because, how many factors go into that? Maybe there's some genetic links to their disability, maybe some of that's learnt behaviour or trauma. So having their childhood historical documentation is not super duper high on their priority list. So, you can get to the doctors and you can start that process. But if all of a sudden, 45-year-old client rocks up with nothing, that process is just so much harder.
Well, then it's going through the whole access and all that. But I think we might delve into that. We might delve into that in a little bit. I think what we might do is we might ask Linda Reynolds a question, which would be nice. So we're going to give you a wand. You've got a wand, which is nice. So if we've got given a wand, what sort of things would we tackle or address with it? Let's just assume that maybe money and a few of these other barriers that are in place are not in place. What sort of things would we ask for to start with? I know we said initially about, the transiency of staff or the lack of. If we could have a bit of a wand and you could ask for one, maybe 2 things, what would those sort of things be?
I think for me, it would be to know on behalf of participants, what is it that you want?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
What is it that you want? And what is the evidence, the magic evidence? What is the magic threshold? And and where is the parity in the system?
What boxes we actually have to tick in your system? And really, that's what it is. It's sometimes you get those new plans come through, and all you need is, I just need to know what the planner was thinking. Do you know what I mean? Like, if I have some more insight into how this plan ended up this way, I know where to go next.
Yeah.
Like, I can go and get you what you need, and I can help the person access what they need.
Yeah.
But sometimes you feel like you're having a random stab in the dark.
Yeah. No, I hear that. That's a really challenging. But you know what? I love the fact that there's so much unity and you're both on the same page with what you're after. That's fantastic. What I'm really interested in is, so we've talked about the lack of services and all that. Let's look at this creatively. I'm a physio by trade and all that sort of stuff. I know quite a fair bit about psychology as well because I love it. Where could we develop capacity, or what could we do that may not be, you talk about being a psychotherapist, right, Devon, like as in that traditionally speaking, you can't really play in the field of psychology with that too much. We've got all these rules and regs and, we've got all these psychologists that have got their undergrads and yet we've got this huge mental health crisis and everything going on, but we've got no capacity. So I suppose what I'm saying is, where do you see, and we'll just open this up to, a box of chocolates, we'll see what we get. Where could we develop capacity or get access to services for people that they much need, right?
I don't know where you start with that. Everything. We have everything.
It's depending on, as well, I guess, like the client group you focus on, you're working with. I think there's a big question. I know that there is a huge gap. I work a lot with families and children with disabilities, in supporting parents to understand, and supporting parents in the kind of case management perspective of having a child or multiple children with disabilities, and translating that into support. So often people get capacity building funding and there's only just enough for the children. And there's nothing left over for parents to help parents, educate them in how we manage other agencies, how all of a sudden you become a professional in your own child's life. So I think, building people's capacity up in that way, but again, it would need more funding, would be really beneficial.
And even support for them too.
Yeah, that's what I mean, yeah.
Like beyond like the child's needs, there's so many parents that I have a very open discussion with about getting their own mental health care plan. Like to care for yourself, because you can't help to fill other people's cup if yours is super duper empty. And it's no one person, especially if you're dealing with some really challenging behaviours and stuff from those young people, parents are exhausted. So they feel, like that failure, or that they're not doing a good enough job, when in reality no one person can do that. It takes a team to do that. And
I think one of the things that myself and some colleagues talked about the other day is that, it's actually a client, we're talking about how, the NDIS talks a lot about informal supports, and it comes from a perspective that ideally we all live in a community where we help each other out and our neighbours are there, and we've got people that can bring us a pot roast when we're not doing really well, or can pick up the dog and do things. But actually the reality is that lots of people work. Lots of people have got fragmented informal supports, that we are separated by distance, and that we don't have that anymore. So when we talk about informal supports, that they don't really exist in the ideal world anymore.
Well, I think you raise a few valid points. A couple of things that come out of that is I just think of Brene Brown, who, talks a lot about, shame and all these other different things. I think parents often, when you've got a child with disability, it's pretty challenging. Like, you feel pretty bad. I don't know from personal experience. I can only speak on behalf of, I've got 3-4 close family members that have got disabilities. So I don't know what it's personally like to have one. But having said that, I've seen it firsthand with many family members, and working through that sort of shame or guilt, and then you talk about filling up your own cup. I mean, like, where's the time and ability, and who's going to do the cooking or the shopping, or, we've only got 1,000 tasks to do, right? Like, how do we go about that? I mean, it's proper challenging. And I think, if you build that capacity early, I mean, fundamentally, if the parent can't cope, what hope does the child have? Tim from our organisation is an OT, and he always talks about, if you've got behaviours of concern or anything else like that, and I think we're about to start nodding, if we've got behaviours of concern, anything like that going on, typically there's an unmet need. What's the unmet need? And if you can work out what the unmet need is, then from there you can actually start going on to addressing that. And you talk about parental capacity and all that. I mean, isn't that where it starts? I mean, we're all nodding, right? I mean,
yeah. No, I mean, I'm a social worker and a support coordinator. I'm a parent of 3 children with additional needs. So, that really resonates with me, Trevor. It's really hard. I'm fortunate. My background is in case management, is in managing professionals. So I guess that makes it, but a lot of parents haven't got that. And where do they get that support? And parents are getting burnt out, and that has a knock-on effect. There is an unmet need, but you need to look at it from the family system perspective, not necessarily just on that individual child with a disability.
Yeah, no, and I think what just comes to mind as you say that as well, there's a group called My Time. I think we're probably aware of that, but it's probably worthwhile putting out some details. I might get the ones from you directly. Devon, I'm sure you're in touch. I know I've given 14 or 15 free presentations to those groups because I think it's great to be able to have the parents actually understand what's going on and just feel supported, and that there's people there for them, because it can be very isolating and lonely, not just as a support coordinator, but as a parent, massively. So I think it's probably worthwhile giving them a shout out there. Have we got anything else to add on this? Otherwise, I think I've got a couple other questions up my sleeve.
Go for it.
Go for it, yeah.
Perfect. Well, so maybe we'll flip it. Let's do some good news, shall we? I'd love to hear a couple good news stories. You got one each? Shall we go through? Devon, you want to kick off?
I've had some. I think we really try to focus on like celebrating our wins, because it's really easy to get bogged down in, the tricky, hard, complex stuff. But our team overall has seen some really cool stuff in the last couple of years that I've been part of it. Some of I find equipment and assistive technology super interesting personally. So we found some really cool like prosthesis and prosthetics, some awesome waterproof cochlear covers so people can go swimming.
That's cool.
Yeah, we've found some cool 4-wheel drive off-road wheelchairs. So people that live out in the land and out on properties and stuff, they take it through the creek, through the paddocks. They take it everywhere, and it's just them. It's their normal life, and it's back to normal really for them. There's been some really interesting stuff, and some I wasn't sure I was actually going to get through, but we did get it approved very recently, and I got a very happy text message when it got approved. We got a hoist for a car to actually pick up a wheelchair and put it in the tray of a car, so that this person can self-load their very, very 280-kilo wheelchair into the car on their own. Like, how cool is that?
That's really cool.
Is that not just preaching? Like, we talk about, I don't know if I like the words, but an ordinary life, and we talk about inclusivity, and Dylan Olcott, like he was going through, he was on a webinar the other day. Is that not exactly what it is? Like, that just makes me feel so warm inside. Like, it's amazing.
Yep. That's what this was for this person. They wanted to get back to their normal everyday life for them. Because normal and everyday looks different for everyone, but they had an accident that was, their disability was a result of that incident, and this was them getting back to that. Yeah. So, back to their everyday normal out on the land life. So it was really cool.
Oh, that's lovely. It's all the warm fuzzies there. Christy, I hear you're going to deliver some more though, so I'm all...
Not necessarily. And the exciting stuff for me is I love seeing the transitions between childhood to adulthood when work with young people who are transitioning through, and just finding some really amazing people that are really committed to young people and to working really hard. So some really good SLES providers. So there's post-school supports, just finding young people who are really, really lost and struggling with their disability and how they're going to find their place in the world, but actually, finding jobs that they love and getting off to university. Those have been some really big wins recently, and it's just finding those really good connections and finding people that are willing to put the miles in to travel from the metro up to the country and build those relationships, and put that time in, not just to the participants, but also to businesses and to, colleges and schools and things, to put the work in, has been brilliant. And just shows what the NDIS can achieve. Like, it's amazing when it works really well.
That's amazing. I think fundamentally we've got a lot of potential. There's lots of potential, right? It's just about, and we might have discussed this prior to actually starting the podcast, how do we actually get this into, I'm not going to say uniform, but we get what I'm saying, like getting a little bit more consistency with how we go about this, because you talked about ticking boxes and all that before. It'd just be nice to know where are the goalposts. If we know where we're aiming, it makes it a lot easier for us to get success more often than not. So what we might do, though, is we've had a few people that have helped both of you individually along the way. I'd love you to give a bit of a shout out to a couple of those people, and also just maybe share a little bit about how they inspired you or moved you along your journey in the disability space. Devon?
Yep. So mine would be the leadership team that I work with, my manager, Chris McDougall, and my exec manager, Tracy Holden. Chris and I actually were both in the team as in different roles when I first started, but Tracy's always been our exec manager. So it's been really cool to be able to work alongside Tracy and have her support for us to both excel into the positions that we are. And I feel super lucky that I've had the opportunities that I've had and reached this point in my career at such a young age. Like I only finished uni 4 years ago. So it's been pretty awesome for me. I'm also really lucky that my parents instilled an awesome work ethic into my sister and I. So that's something that I'm very, very thankful for.
I was going to pick you up on that. I was like, oh, geez, some good thanks out there. And clearly you've had some influential people, but I would definitely say through experience and having worked with you that you definitely work beyond your years and your incredibly passionate enthusiasm. It's amazing, and it's also a testament as to where you are. I think that's also what comes into it. Christy, you've got a couple of people that sort of influenced you a little bit.
Well, I think I'm kind of like the opposite end of the spectrum to Devon in that, like, considerably older. And I actually I'd had a career, and then I had been at home for several years with my children, and had no thoughts of really going back to work until I stumbled across the growing space. And this amazing group of people headed up by Sam Pale, whose name I probably said wrong, but just became, was avidly following them, and then had this amazing opportunity to come work with them. And it's a really inspiring group of people. Always lived experience that has inspired me, not only as a support coordinator, but social worker, but as a mom probably as well. And one of the things that Sam always says is it's not the work you do, it's the people you meet. And it is absolutely the participants that I've met along the way are just phenomenal. And it's just a real honour, really, to working in this space.
Oh, it's fantastic. I think it's really good to give thanks out, because I know it can often feel a little bit thankless in what you do. And I think when we reflect upon, they talk about getting out of the trenches and seeing the roses and all that sort of stuff. I think fundamentally when you see the impact and the difference you make on a daily basis, you don't always see it, but it's definitely worthwhile, I would say.
It is.
Quite interesting journeys.
It's important to focus on the good bits and the things that you achieve and the awesome people that you get to work alongside with as colleagues and as clients. I think it's a really privileged position. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is, yeah. Well, I agree, Devon.
Oh, absolutely. Well, so we're talking about services and all that. Let's maybe talk a little bit about, we'll get into types of services that we need. And I'm curious, I'm starting creating a bit of a ripple around what types of services and how can things get done possibly differently to then be able to get people the service they need. I mean, like now, not like as in 6 months, 12 months time. Like, how can we give people what they need now? So what sort of services are people mainly needing now? Clearly, allied health's a big one. We might start there, but I think you mentioned earlier, Christy, and I think Devon, you might have said housing, quite a shortage of. So who would like to start as far as, what are the biggest needs we've got in rural settings? And really what I'm doing is doing a call out right now for anyone listening to, do your numbers and work out whether you can make it work, or even if you can't make it work, find a way to make it work. That's what a few of us need to do. And I know we've got some passionate people that I've had on LinkedIn that have very much expressed interest to do so. I'd love to keep this movement going. So what services do we need, and who's starting?
Oh,
Go for it,
housing. Housing, any kind of housing service would be really beneficial, because there is a housing crisis. There's a housing crisis, and we're very, very hard hit, I think, in regional areas. Financial counselling that's easy to access, that comes to you, will be really beneficial too. And obviously all your allied health and things. But I think that family support, it does exist in the NGOs, but it's quite hard to access sometimes for people. So I think, a more robust family support kind of system that doesn't require a family to necessarily be at the crisis point would be beneficial too.
And
being proactive versus being reactive.
That proactive rather than reactive. Yeah. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I completely agree. Just while you are mentioning it there as well, I know we skipped over allied health pretty quickly. Was there particular needs that you do have? Because I think this is always an interesting conversation, and I'm working on educating quite a lot of people about different services and how we can make it happen, maybe not the ordinary way. Still the same result, but is it OTs? Is it psychology? Speech pathologists, podiatrists even? I don't know. Who do we need?
I think it's all of the above. I mean, psychology is definitely something that we really struggle to get at all in this area. And when you do find a psychologist, they're booked up. So psychologists absolutely is a great need for that, and OTs as well.
We all know how much. Yeah. So we all know how much the NDIS loves a good functional capacity assessment.
That's what I was about to say. Yeah, I'm only saying yeah. Whether or not that's necessarily meeting the need of a participant or the demands of the agency. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the thing, isn't it? As in, what part of that do you need? I mean, Chris, you're a social worker, and Devon, you're a psychotherapist and all that sort of stuff. At what point can we start getting social workers doing some of this sort of work, and at what point can we start getting maybe do you have to have your masters in psychology to be able to practice, or can we put a compliance framework in place that maybe something's better than nothing? I'm not saying negligence, I'm not saying being disrespectful to those that are qualified, I'm not at all saying that, but I know some social workers, we've got some in our team as an example, that do quite a lot of work as far as working with trauma or sensory needs and emotional regulation. I mean, these are things that something has got to be better than nothing. I suppose that's my sort of preaching thing, and my request, I guess, to all the big peak bodies and all the allied health professionals, physio, OT, dietetics, is, what need can you fulfill? And also, how can we get this happening now? Because the services are required now. You talk about particularly psychology and OT, really, needing that. So how can we address that need now? And I know the unis are trying to get more people through, but, I don't know whether it's going to catch up. They talk about how much workforce we're going to need in the next couple of years, hundreds of thousands of more participants. So hopefully we can build that capacity up sooner to not have more people miss out.
Yeah, we've had some interesting experiences with, I think they broadly label it as a behaviour support practitioner. So lots of people fit that bill, and that in some places can be super useful, because that can be the counsellor or the social worker or the developmental educator or the OT, or, it can be that larger pool of people, some of who, they may be doing their master's years, or they may be fourth year students or whatever, that have those skills to do that. And especially if you're implementing a plan that's done by that clinical person, maybe that's something that people consider. And a lot of the participants that we worked with were really happy with that, because it gave them flexibility in that they had more choice in the providers they wanted, and they could find someone that really met their needs and they could get on with quite well. So, you might have that clinical degree holding creator of the plan, and then a pool of people that implement it and, could be quite successful.
I think you raised good points there as far as the behaviour support practitioner. I think it's quite interesting. You might actually have teachers come into that role soon. Because if you think of teachers, they're constantly working with behaviours and all that. Now, clearly need the training for it as well. But it's definitely something that we need to work out. Where can we get capacity from? And I think you're really identifying some good needs there. I think another one that I talk about pretty regularly is just about, what do you need done from an OT? Is it a functional? Is it something a developmental educator could do? Mm-hmm. Could you partner a social worker up with a physio and then you actually do get both angles looked at? And is that similar to a functional capacity evaluation or assessment? Just looking at things differently. And I think it'll be great when we do speak to Aaron about, what is the box that we need to tick, and maybe if we can get there in a roundabout way and we quality control it and we test it, is that good enough? And maybe it needs to be, I don't know.
I think the idea of getting really good teams together. So you may have limited therapy funding, but if you've got a really good support worker who can work alongside the recommendations of an OT, so we're talking about functional capacity. A support worker could do that, or you could have somebody who's a personal trainer doing an at-home program developed by the physio. But obviously costing a lot less funding, and being more accessible and being more regular. There are ways of, I guess, being creative and really working on a more team approach.
Mm-hmm. Or even in group settings too. It gives people options to have that social experience too, for people who do have quite a limited social area community, to work towards, obviously individualised goals, but independent living skills building. We're doing cooking, or we're doing budgeting, we're doing accessing education, all of these things that give people a common ground to work towards, even though it's individualised for them. You're not alone type thing with that as well.
I completely agree with what you're saying there. I think I know COVID's been a thing, right? That's been around. I think we're quite vastly aware about that, right? But fundamentally, I think we've missed out in regards to groups. Economically, it doesn't make sense. As in economically through the NDIS, you get 5 people organised, and this is one of the things I'd like to bring up. Hopefully Linda Reynolds and her team, I'd love the NDIA to give a comment and a response on it. But particularly it's if we get 5 people organised and we're going to bill everyone $40 each or whatever else it might be, you're organising 5 people, you've got to bill that 5 times. That's 5 more things that could go right or wrong. So, why don't we just make it so it's at least cost neutral if we're going to do group settings? Because I know that we would love to do, a lot of the practitioners in our team would love to do group settings. We're talking about cooking, we're talking about, the financial skills and that. There's no reason why you couldn't get a group together, reasonable room, up on a presentation, they could have their computers or however you want to do it, and actually increase their skills. But fundamentally, if it gets into the too hard basket, you don't get anything. And I suppose the thing would be, imagine if you could do that in a rural setting. Surely that's even more valuable, because it's you don't get people out there. And if you can end up seeing 30 or 40 people in one sitting, as opposed to, when I say one sitting, you might do, 4 groups of 10.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying a group of 40 is a good idea, because it's probably not. But as in, if we could do that, as in, fundamentally, is that not, I don't know, is that the way of the future? As in, I like to think that we're a bit innovative, and maybe it's possible. What do you reckon about that? I'd love to know.
I can tell you now the steps and balance class is the place to be. There is a local steps and balance class on, I think, a Friday morning. It is the bee's knees. That is where you want to be to work on your mobility.
Mm-hmm. And we actually have a local gym here where it's registered with the NDIS. And who does group settings, personal training, and it's amazing. It can work really, really well. But I think as well the precaution is that it has to be individualised down to people's preference. Yeah. So I'd hate to hear, it can be done in the group setting at the cost of $40 per head, when that's not actually going to meet the needs of every participant.
Oh, definitely.
And that's the fine line, isn't it? That's the balance.
100%. I think the thing is that and this is just talking from a business case. Now, I'd hate talking about it from this sense, but we do have to as a businesses around, is that if you're going to see 4 people and it's going to be the same price as if you were to see 1 person, you just wouldn't bother. You've just got to make it make sense. It doesn't have to be, you make $400 or $500 for 4 people there. But I don't know, maybe if it's like 270 or 80 or 300 maybe, it just makes a bit more sense to cover all the admin for all the extra phone calls, the cancellations. And I don't personally think it's that fair if we've got, let's say we've got, let's do 5 in a setting, 5 times 40 is $200, say. Now, if you're planning on doing 10 sessions and, they're all at a set rate, if you don't rock up, like as in it's one of these things. Should other people get charged more? Because what if they could afford it for 10 sessions if everyone rocks up, but then now they don't, then people don't have funding. Like, once again, like I don't really think that it's fair to rob Peter to pay Paul, or I just think we've got to come up with some system. And I know we probably don't want to go down the pathway of subscriptions, but you get what I'm sort of saying. It's trying to have the individualized, but then also have the group approach, which I personally think, hey, like, aren't we now helping with socializing? I mean, what's the NDIS about? Fundamentally, it's, economic, community participation, increasing function, normal life. I think that's what it's all about. But, I mean, who knows? I have to keep banging on about it, I guess.
And I suppose it's too is making sure that the group is not the only option, is having it available. Yeah. But, you can only access X service if you fit this. You can't have it to have your own way, or groups of 2 or 3 rather than groups of 7 and 10.
Yeah,
it's like being more realistic so that you have this option, or you can do it your own way and do it on your own. So gives people whatever option they want, but
choice and control.
Yeah, 100%. But like you said, it's having that abundance of staff and space and availability to offer those things. If we can't even offer one-to-one services because we've got no one to facilitate it, who's going to put the time and effort into trying to facilitate a group?
Yeah.
Well, if we made it work, though, maybe they would.
And they might if someone else does the groundwork. You've got to fill that spot.
Oh, you do. I mean, I suppose, like I'll just throw it out there. We went up to, I said to you previous, we went up to Wyler. It was a 10-hour round trip, and there was someone we saw, and it was 30 minutes travel we charged. It's a 9.5-hour loss. You know what I mean? Now, I don't necessarily say it that way. I said it's a 9.5 hours invested in country community, which I'm from, which I think is great. But fundamentally, you've got to address those sorts of issues. And you probably get that, I dare say, even not, it's not as far up Murray Bridge, but like I'm assuming you get that quite a lot as well. You probably get services to Mount Barker, but I reckon beyond Mount Barker, I reckon
we struggle. We just get told, it's not possible, or the charge to the participant is so much, the plans that the participants get do not compensate for the fact that the travel charge is going to be so high. So if you're in Manham and your service is coming from Adelaide, the travel charges are far greater and it becomes not viable.
Yeah,
I totally get that.
Yeah.
It is a real challenge there. What we might move on to, there's a couple future guests. I think we had Deb and Dan that were mentioned that we thought might be good guests, and even Sam. So I'll be very interested as far as I'll have to follow up with them. Quick little mention there, but I think that we'll end up, this conversation today has been really fruitful, and I'd love to hear more about what they've got to say. Particularly, I guess, given that we're on the theme of support coordination, country setting and all that, what sort of tips and tricks might you offer to a colleague, say if they were sitting next to you or just up the road, 50 Ks, say, in a country setting? What sort of tips and tricks would you offer? Good, bad news, whatever it might be.
I think for me, it's expand your concept of what team means. So I work remotely. I'm the only one sitting here in Murray Bridge with the growing space. My team is the growing space, but it's also the support workers, the family members, the professionals, the allied health professionals up here, and they become your team. I'm really changed that concept. So you're not siloed. Yeah. Support coordinator can be quite an isolated role anyway, but really making sure that you make those connections. And a lot of that will you end up spending a lot of unbillable time, like most support coordinators do, just making those connections. But they're the people that you ring, they become your go-to when you're stuck.
I was going to say exactly the same thing. I was going to say know who's around.
Yeah.
There's different support coordinators I'll ring with questions because it's not you keep your secrets in your business over there. It's like work together. As soon as Trevor and I had our first conversation one day on the phone, I put his number and his email address straight into our Far North Air Western service provider meeting.
Yep.
I was like, everyone meet Trevor. Yeah, because we need more Trevor here. You know what I mean? It was like working together, because in the past we've been really successful working with other support coordinators to make it, viable business options for providers to come down for an entire week.
Yeah.
So if we can facilitate those conversations with other providers, we can have people coming down from Adelaide doing 2 days in Peary, a day in Port Augusta, and 2 in Whyalla. And then it keeps business providers happy, because I understand from that perspective you have to make it a viable business choice, but also gives participants options for face-to-face service delivery.
Yeah.
I really like that concept of making it viable. And I think maybe even making it a destination sort of thing, like maybe the councils. And I know because I was on council at Mount Barker, and they have quite a role to play in this as well, about facilitating services getting to the area. Now, Mount Barker does pretty well because of its location, but we talk about Murray Bridge Council, and we talk about, out at Whyalla. I think Peter Brock, for example, I think just recently got elected, sort of, again, not on council, but like as in they play a huge role in being able to facilitate people coming in. So, there's no reason why you couldn't go up there and do something, make it a bit of a destination where you go up there, work, and then maybe have a weekend or something following that's away, and then come back. Or, you've got options. I suppose it's about looking at it. I think you said it several times there, Christy, about being creative, about how you go about it. And if you come in with that approach, I think you can make things work if you want to. It has come to that time. We're on to our final question. It's a big one, though. I do promise that. So let's pretend it's 20 years into the future and we have achieved success in the disability sector. What does it look like? What does it feel like? Paint me a picture. Devon, you're up first.
Oh, what does it look like? I suppose it looks like answers. If we ask questions, we get those answers. What do you need? What do you want from us? More open, transparent communication, I think, would be ideal for me. I understand, planners and delegates and all that have their role, but some teamwork, come together, work together, open transparency. I'd be doing a lot less reports, a lot less change of circumstances forms.
Yeah.
A lot less plan extensions because everyone's on top of everything. That's what I'm looking for.
Oh, wow. Where do I sign up? Is there a page? Is there a link? Is there something I can click?
Yeah, I think what I picked up from you, Trevor, is that, what does it feel like? And it would feel anxiety-free. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't feel crisis-driven.
Yeah.
It wouldn't feel like a challenge. It wouldn't feel like an us and them sector.
Yeah.
Participants would feel confident in going to speak to the NDIS. They wouldn't feel that they had to justify the disability needs to somebody who may or may not have the relevant experience to make a determination on them.
Yeah, 100%.
People that would feel supported.
Yeah, well, I got tingles on my arms just sort of thinking about that, particularly in regards to the plan review process, which I know I'm going to cover in a later episode, but I think feeling that you're okay. Yeah. You are okay exactly as you are and as you're not. Mm-hmm. You didn't do anything necessarily to get this disability or anything else like that, and we equally provide opportunities and choices for you, and you have dignity, and you don't have to say lots of bad things about yourself necessarily to get funding, because I do find from having sat through several planning conversations with family members and that it is humiliating. I feel humiliated for them going through that process, and I'm sure clearly we're all agreeing that that's the same as well. On a more positive note, we are finishing up here. So we have been talking to Devon and from Uniting Country SA, and also Christy from the Growing Space. Ladies, where can people go to find out more about what it is you do? Devon, we might start with you.
Yep. We've got a website. All of my info's on there for the team. Most people just give me a ring. We've now got a new marketing person. Shout out to Anna on Facebook. Our presence online is much larger. So Facebook, LinkedIn, website. We also have a lot of people just walk through our front door. If we're not the right people to help you, we're happy to point you in the right direction for people who are. So, reach out. We can answer as many questions as we can.
Thank you so much. And Christy?
Yep. The Growing Space, I've got a website, thegrowing.space.com, which is full of resources, free resources, a learning hub as well. Everyone's details are on there. There's a profile of all the support coordinators, so you can go through and have a read about who you feel may fit your needs and just ask questions.
The resources are good. I use a few.
Yeah, they're really good.
I was going to say, I was going to have a chat with Sam and see if we could share the web a little bit with some of the resources. There's quite a lot of them.
There's some really good ones on there.
It's really fantastic. I will pop in the show notes all the information so you can get in touch with these lovely ladies. And very much thank you both for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor.